You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Rockies. This is Sarah Jane Maroney, your host for Engage the Rockies, your go-to podcast concerning local and state issues for Colorado. Welcome to our interview with Jill Gaebler. She currently serves as Executive Director at Pikes Peak Housing Network, a local nonprofit working to advance housing affordability, access, and production. She's a former city councilwoman for District 5 in Colorado Springs, and during her 8 years on city council, Jill focused her work on multimodal transportation, attainable housing, downtown development, and local food production. Prior to her council service, Jill spent 6 years as the development director at Grecio Housing, a local affordable housing nonprofit. Additionally, she co-founded Colorado Springs Charter Academy, a public school in District 5, and has served on many community boards, including Pikes Peak Library District Board of Trustees, Downtown Development Authority, the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, Colorado Municipal League, Homeward, Pikes Peak, and the Front Range Passenger Rail District. Jill arrived in Colorado Springs in 2000 after serving 7 years as an Air Force officer, where she worked as a contracting officer. She and her husband of 34 years live in the Patty Jewett neighborhood and enjoy riding their bikes on our many local bike lanes. We welcome her. Welcome, Jill. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. So tell me all the things. You are the executive director for Pikes Peak Housing Network. Is that correct?
Yes, I am the inaugural executive director of Pikes Peak Housing Network. It is a nonprofit that began at the end of 2023. So we just finished our first year in operation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. To be clear, however, the founders of Pikes Peak Housing Network are a bunch of housing-related adjacent people who have been for many years trying to figure out how can we impact the housing crisis we're experiencing? What should we be doing? They held a lot of community conversations. They talked to a bunch of people, electeds, whatever. And their outcome was to start an organization that is working on these issues 24/7. And Pikes Peak Housing Network is truly the only organization doing this work in the entire state of Colorado. There are groups that do parts of it, but we are the only one doing this work. And instead of starting a separate nonprofit right out of the gate, they chose to have the organization have a fiscal sponsorship. So we are fiscally sponsored through the Chamber and EDC here in Colorado Springs. And they hold my money, but I am an independent organization under that umbrella.
Oh, interesting. So it's money from the chamber? Has anything to do with tax dollars?
No, I mean, so the chamber is a 501c6, so they can advocate and do lobbying things. They have a foundation underneath them, and Pikes Peak Housing Network is just an independent organization that uses the foundation for its financial. It holds our money separately, so that I can take tax-free donations and operate as a nonprofit. A lot of nonprofits start this way so they can see if they can get legs before they work through the paperwork to establish their own nonprofit.
And you've made it through a year, so you're hopeful that is going to happen?
I am. It's very hopeful. My board needs to actually probably make that decision. We need to do that together. The chamber has been a really big support for us, helping us to gain awareness for the work. And of course, we have a lot of commonalities. They care a lot about the housing crisis. They talk to a lot of our current employers and businesses that want to move to the region. And they're telling the chamber, hey, housing's an issue. Our employees can't find housing they can afford. We're afraid to move here because your housing affordability is so poor. So they care a lot and wanted to be a part of the solution.
Brilliant. So I actually do want to read. This is from the Common Sense Institute, and this is just a little blurb from their housing. I think it was I'm not sure if it was just a report or whatever that came out, but anyway. Colorado ranks dead last, 50th in housing affordability. The Home Buyers Misery Index surged across all counties in the second half of 2023, driven by rising mortgage rates and stagnant wages. Housing costs remain out of reach for most Coloradans, creating significant barriers to economic mobility and stability. So I assuming that you would wholeheartedly agree with that.
I do agree with that. I had not heard that we were dead last as a state, but I guess in certain ways I'm not surprised.
So talk me through this then. I guess we need to know a little bit more about what it is that you do. We found out how you're established, but when you're helping the housing crisis, what are you doing?
Right. And I mean, it is kind of crucial and it becomes difficult. I won't start that way. Pikes Peak Housing Network is really truly an advocacy organization. We're not building housing. We're not doing anything to move that needle. We provide a lot of data, a little similar to the Common Sense Institute, but focused on the Pikes Peak region around housing issues. And the data, data doesn't lie. And it shows how incomes have risen comparatively to the price of housing, whether it's rental housing or home mortgages. And incomes just haven't risen anywhere near the cost of housing. We provide a lot of data. We also are very supportive of developers who are trying to build housing, and that can be connecting them to financing, but largely it's giving them good data and helping them to move their projects through the entitlement process or through the decision maker process. So getting it past council, approved by council, getting it approved by the county commissioners. And that has become more increasingly difficult as there are a lot of opposition groups who don't want any new housing in our region for various reasons. Often it's just because they don't like change, but they are concerned about increased traffic, increased congestion, and more often around fire mitigation or fire egress if in case we had another fire. So I need to provide good data and show, this is not going to harm these things. It's not going to reduce your home price, but we need additional housing. Here's why. Here is the type of housing we need to ensure that we're providing the housing for those who are coming. And that's a lot of data, but it's also really just kind of telling the story about humanizing housing, who's moving here and why it's important. And a lot of people just haven't made that connection.
And you have quite an illustrious career. You were in the Air Force?
I was a contracting officer, not a very exciting or illustrious work, but it was interesting.
Still, we thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And that's what brought you to Colorado Springs 25 years ago?
My husband and I and my two young children at the time moved here in 2000. I had already left the Air Force at that time. I left when I wanted to have children. I chose to stay home. My husband was also in the Air Force. He was an A-10 pilot. And at the time he was flying for American Airlines. So we were living in Dallas before that. My last service was at actually Texas Instruments. I was doing contracting there. There was a joint service assignment, and of course my husband flew out of Dallas Fort Worth. We chose to move here. We have family here. I don't know about you, but once I had kids, I needed help and needed family around. So yeah, we moved here just for family a long time ago, and we're never leaving.
Well, good. We're happy to hear that. So, in terms of choosing Colorado Springs, you also, before we return to the housing crisis, you served on the Colorado Springs City Council. Tell me a little bit about that.
I did. Actually, before that, I went back to work. I guess when my kids were in junior high school, I started working at Greshio Housing, and they are the largest affordable housing provider here in Colorado Springs. So I learned a lot about housing at that time. They do property management. They have grown significantly since I left. And honestly, when I was there, I started that job in 2007, trying to help people understand what affordable housing was complicated. That was not a term that people used. It wasn't part of the vernacular. So a lot has changed since then. And so I worked there until I was elected in 2013. and then was term limited in 2021. And yeah, I enjoyed my 8 years as an elected leader.
Wonderful. Would you have, just as as one more segue, do you have any advice? We have 15 candidates, two of which are current council members, but the rest aren't. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I like meeting with people running for office, and I always ask them, the first question is, why are you doing this? And I mean, people have a lot of different answers, but unless you're doing it because you love the city of Colorado Springs and you really want to make decisions that are the best for its citizens, I encourage people not to run. A lot of people run because they have one particular issue they care about and they want to focus on that issue. The city council has a very narrow scope in the work it accomplishes. It's very much land use driven, and they don't have a lot of voice on a lot of city issues. And so often people will get elected and they'll realize, oh, wait a minute, I actually don't get to be in charge of that. So I mean, learn about what the job entails and realize you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you love your city and you're ready just to dig in. There's so many things you can engage on. You have to figure out what you enjoy. And land use was a big piece for me, which is why now I'm working in that field in a different area.
Yes, the city clerk, Sarah Johnson, explained to us that the salaries for the city council are not hugely significant. And oftentimes you have that reaction of, no, no, I don't want to give a government official any more money. And yet the salary is less than 10, it's 6,000 something dollars, and it hasn't
Yeah.
changed since the
Yes.
1980s.
It's $6,250. And I used
Wow.
to call it my Costco money. And I do think it's a barrier. I mean, you want your elected leadership to represent your community, and only those who can afford not to work or work part time, or in my case, have a spouse who's earning an income, a livable income, can you do that. So we had a lot of retirees on the council, and yeah, they represent a significant portion of our city, but younger people especially are often left out. And until we provide a living wage to our council members, it's just the council will continue to be older and I don't know, not working people.
Right. So circling back then, in terms of the time that you spent on after the council and working for Greshio Housing, what? So do you want to explain to us what affordable housing is?
Yeah, so there are two definitions of affordable housing. We refer to it as capital A affordable, and that is truly affordable housing that has been built with subsidies, in some regard, tax credits from the state or the federal government. And you honestly cannot build capital A affordable housing without government support. And that is typically housing that is available and can only be rented out to people who earn a portion of the area median income. Right now, for an individual in El Paso County, the area median income, not average income, is around, I think it's 87,000. And so someone who qualifies to live in affordable housing typically earns 30 to 80% of whatever that number is.
Of the
And
median.
then we have affordable housing, which could be anywhere from that 30% all the way up to 120% of the area median income. And that's for a single person. If you have a family of four, that number rises to, I don't know, I think it's 104,000 now. So those numbers are actually pretty high. And so we have a significant number of people in our community who earn less than the median income. And renters, it's far more of our renters, of course, that are in that category, fewer people who own their homes. And so they are currently struggling to make ends meet, because we also have another thing we look at, and that's ensuring that people, if it, have an affordable rent. And that not only means about the area median income, but it's that you're not spending more than 30% of your income on your rent. And we talk about that number being not just your rent, but it's your rent, it's your utilities. And if you own your home, it's also your property taxes and increasingly your insurance, which is starting to go up, and we're noticing this. And it's our legislators are now starting to talk about it and figure out what we can do as people's insurance are becoming a higher percentage of their overall mortgage payment, and they're struggling to make ends meet.
So what do we do? I mean, I know that there has been quite a lot in Colorado Springs. Everywhere you look, it seems like there's building going on, and
Right.
yet the ratio of people to housing, it still seems like there isn't enough. So, and we are booming. I did look up some numbers a while back, and since the 1980s, Colorado Springs has tripled in size, basically.
Right. And we're expected to grow like another 115,000 in the next 5 years or 10 years. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I'm a data person, but I'm getting worse at memorizing it. So, I mean, part of the biggest issue in my mind is that, yeah, we're still building. And if you look at regional buildings department, they provide an end of the year number of how many units we permitted in 2024. We permitted 800 apartment units, for instance. I think it was 838. I looked at that just today, so it's still in my short-term memory. And then we permitted a couple thousand single family homes. And yeah, so we are building. And I mean, you mentioned the Common Sense Institute. They will say, based on their data, that we are behind about 17 to, I mean, like 25,000 homes.
Wow.
And that, so we need to be building X number of homes in addition to what we're building to catch up to that number. I think, people can make data say what they want it to say. We are behind. But for me, what I notice is, although we're building, it's a mismatch. We need to be building homes that are smaller, condos, and we need to be building more affordable types of apartment units. If you look downtown, we're building a lot of I mean, they like to say luxury, but they are higher end apartments. And so we are starting to absorb those units at a pretty reasonable number, but we need apartments that are lower income community members, and we need homes that are just smaller. I mean, if you look at homes that were built 50 years ago, they were a lot smaller on smaller parcels of land. Land is a huge component to the overall cost of a home. And some of our developers are starting to figure that out. They're building homes that are smaller, they're building homes on smaller lots, and they're also building homes that may include an optional accessory dwelling unit, so you can have rental income from another family, or a mother or child live in your home. But the biggest issue we're having locally in the state of Colorado, that is the condo issue. And we aren't building condos, which are honestly the first usually home purchase of a first-time home buyer, and they can afford that level. It's a lower price. The average home price right now in El Paso County is, I think it's 480,000, where condos it's about 100,000 lower. So people can more easily purchase a condo, but we're not building them because we have an issue at the state level, and they call it construction defects. And we have been trying for years to change the state law to make it easier to build condos. And it's typically
Explain that a little bit more. What do you mean by
the
what
construction
laws are
defect,
inhibiting? Yeah.
right? So right now, our laws allow, if there is a defect in a unit, in a condo unit, a trial lawyers usually will come in. They can often take the unit down to the studs. They can find the defects, and then they get the other owners in the condo property to file a class action lawsuit that, of course, magnifies the cost of the lawsuit, because it's all the units. And the developer of that property doesn't have the opportunity to come in and say, hey, I'll fix that defect instead of you filing a class action lawsuit. We are one of the few states in the country that doesn't allow the developer to come in and repair. We call that a right to repair. And so we at the state level have been trying for several years now to change the law to allow a right to repair clause, where a developer can come in and fix something before there's a class action lawsuit filed. and make it a little more onerous to file that lawsuit. Right now, you have to get a simple majority of the condo owners, maybe make it 60 to 65% of the condo owners who have to agree on whether you should have that litigation. Because once you get in that litigation, it could take years. And once that litigation begins, people owning those units, they can't sell them, they can't do anything. So they're kind of stuck. And
So,
a
so
lot of
you're
them,
saying that the developers don't want to build condos because of these rules?
the condos can't build condos in most cases because they can't get insurance, because the insurers realize that this issue in Colorado makes it very risky for them to take on that insurance. So they can't get the insurance, or it's too expensive for the developer to take on. I mean, it's honestly like 5% of the cost of the development. And so the developers just have stopped building them. In the city of Colorado Springs, we built 40 this year. And it's
Wow.
usually folks who will do like 5 over here. You know, they'll do a small number, and we need thousands of condos in the city of Colorado Springs. And I can't speak for the whole state, but I mean, as far as what their data is, but nobody's really building them. And last year we tried really hard to get a bill passed. It was Senate Bill 106, and we just could not get the Democrats to come on board. They just kept saying we have to take care of the owners. Well, I mean, I would argue that the the builder can come in much faster and repair than going through this nightmare of a process where at the end of the day, the trial lawyer will get most of the proceeds and you may not even have the money to fix it afterwards. Anyway, that was a long
No,
argument.
that's very interesting. There aren't a lot of condos in Colorado
Mhm.
Springs. It's something,
No.
as you explain this, that makes a lot of sense and gives you the information. And yet it didn't really occur to me, there aren't as many. But yes, that's very, very true.
And
What other, go ahead. Sorry.
since supply and demand, is real, since we have a hot supply for them, I'm sorry, a hot demand for them and not much supply, those that are available tend to go for top price. I have a 26-year-old son who lives here, and we've been out numerous times trying to find him a home, and he just cannot find something. And he earns over the area median income, but so it's very difficult, and our employers are struggling to bring um, more of their facilities here because we just do not have the housing stock that is in that market for them.
So again, what other things could be done? Like what, obviously you tried to get a bill through the legislature to change the condo law. That didn't happen. What are other things that can be done in the meantime to try and help this? Because again, as I said, lots of people look around and say, "Oh, there's so much building. We don't want more building." And it's like, well, actually, there's this housing crisis going on.
Yeah. Um, the other big issue for that I hear about is, I mean, location. We talk about location, 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 and people want to live near where they work. They want to live near where good schools are. And a lot of times the housing's being built in certain areas that are easier to build in, where you're not going to receive the pushback. Downtown is one of those areas. I mean, we hadn't built any apartments in downtown until 2016. It had been 50 years since we built. So
Wow.
we are catching up in downtown. We've built a lot of units, over 2,000 units in the last few years, and that was needed. And we are still building, and I suggest it's still needed, but we need to be building in a lot of other places to meet the demand for people who want to live on the northwest side of town, for instance. We just had an apartment project approved up there, significant opposition, and the council did support it, but we let them know that there is a huge um, semiconductor plant coming in. Integris is building something just north of Ute Valley Park, 600 new jobs, average wage is 75,000. Well, those folks earning 75,000 can't afford the average home price of 620,000 in the northwest side of town. So what are we building to accommodate those new employees? And so the council got it, and they're like, yeah, we need to build these apartments, but apartments on the northwest side of town are typically their vacancy rates or occupancy rates are in the high 90s all the time, and so they don't have openings, and the rental rates are higher over there because of it. Again, supply and demand works. we're building a lot on the very far east side, but even out there, I have a project that's trying to get approved right now, and they're receiving significant opposition from neighbors. And so neighbors need to understand that the people moving into these apartments, they're not like low income people who, I don't know, are going to have their cars up on blocks. These are our nurses. These are our military members. They're our fire department. And so these are our community members, and we need to be more supportive of the housing that needs to be built for them.
Okay, so those are things that can be fixed. What else? I mean, would you find you talked about how the city council has a lot to do with land use, and obviously that's coming up on the 1st of April.
Mm-hmm.
What what can we do in terms of civics and governments and influencing our leaders to hear what you're saying? Again, as I said, this is this whole, oh, but there's building everywhere. But
Right.
maybe, again, these are these questions that are a little bit deeper than the surface.
Right. I mean, I think I'm a big supporter of the Overton window of making incremental change and trying to move that needle in a way that you can kind of test and see did that make a difference, and should we be doing more? And our elected leaders want to do that incrementally and see what works. And one of the things the city council is trying to pass right now is the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and that would allow every homeowner who has the right size property, and I mean with a lot of stipulations, to build one accessory dwelling unit or granny flat, other names for it, on their property. And I think people support this for different reasons, and they don't support it for different reasons. For me, it's a property rights issue, and we should be giving people the right to build on their property where they can earn revenue, they can house a family member, whatever it, within certain constraints. And we have a lot of community members who don't think people should have that right.
Hmm.
And I think our council is mostly supportive, but they need to support that. They the laws passed at the state level last year, so they have to support something, and they have to get that passed. But I'm a huge supporter of, if even 2% of our community built an accessory dwelling unit, it would be a couple thousand new homes. Boom, right off the bat. And you have no idea how that impacts the young family that wants to live in the good neighborhood in the Old North End, for instance, but where the good schools are, and then have a shorter commute to downtown where they're saving on transportation costs too. So it has a big impact on a family when they can finally afford something in the neighborhood they want to live in.
Well, thank you. One final question for you. You have done quite a lot on city council as a civil servant. And so I guess, and even in the private sector, what are you, and we've talked about this with quite a few guests where politics is a team sport, but it also has individual components. So, but I guess my question to you would be in terms of how you've influenced Colorado Springs. This is your chosen place to be and where you're not leaving from. What are you most proud of that you've had a hand in doing?
You didn't give me this up front. I would have.
I didn't.
I mean, it's interesting because I talked a lot about connected communities. I live in Patty Jewett neighborhood, and so we are on a grid, and so it's really easy to walk to my store, and it's really easy to navigate and meet your community members. And I really talked about that a lot, about how we grow our neighborhoods or build our neighborhoods to be more connected. And our developers are starting to do that and kind of go back to the traditional type of building and think about building neighborhoods where your store is down the street. And I've been really supportive. We have a downtown neighborhood store now, and I was a big advocate for that. I also was a co-founder of Pike Ride, which is our electric bike share program, and because of that was instrumental in getting a lot of bike lanes laid, which a lot of people don't appreciate, but they have been very effective at reducing congestion and also having a mode shift there. But for the bike lanes that are in neighborhoods, they slow down traffic and they make our neighborhoods more livable. So I'm very proud of that, and I still have people talk about that. Some love it, some hate it,
Right.
and all good.
Wonderful.
You got to try things.
Well, Jill, we wish you the best with your organization, and we're very thankful for your input, and maybe we'll have you back again to
I
discuss
would be
more.
honored. Okay, thank you
All
so
righty.
much.
Thank
Take
you.
care, Sarah Jane. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.